Welcome teachers to Expectations for the ILLP Classroom. This is Dr. Nicole Teachan McNeil, and I am providing this tutorial for you to be able to come back and observe and understand what needs to be included in your lesson plans when you have an English language learner on an ILLP. So today's objective is for the teacher to review an ILLP in lesson planning by taking notes on how to include English language proficiency standards in the lesson plan. What you need to include in your lesson. By law, students are supposed to have 4 hours of ELD, English language development, that includes reading, grammar, vocabulary, oral language, and writing. Because you're an ILLP teacher, not an SEI teacher, you do not have to do an hour of each, but you do have to incorporate 5 ELP standards to show that you are incorporating those domains within what you're teaching in the English language arts. So we do need to include 5 ELP standards, 1 for reading, 1 for grammar, 1 for vocabulary, 1 for oral language, and 1 for writing. So there are 3 ways that you can access these standards. The first is through a Google site. If you can go to your email, you can go to your Drive, anywhere you have access to your apps, pick sites. You might have it might show up if you've used it before. If it doesn't, you just type in ELAS, search, and it'll come right up. If it doesn't, go ahead and email me and I will send you the link. If you scroll down here on the bottom, you'll be able to find Standards Picker. If you look and it's just not jumping out at you, you can do a search for a picker and it'll pop up. Click on that, and we are going to have a separate tutorial on a standards picker, but I do want to show you that you can access your standard here. So for example, if you're teaching kindergarten and you're teaching reading literature and you're teaching retell familiar stories, click here, done picking, related ELP standards. There's one right there that already popped up for you. So now you have your reading standard. Control copy, put it in your lesson plan, and control paste. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is all of you already have an ILLP for your students. Attachment A has the standards you should be teaching that quarter. So once you pick your standards, you can come in here and cut and paste from your intermediate students what standards are aligned to what you're teaching. And a third way to access your standards and align it to what you're teaching is by our website. Okay, so if you click on our website, go home. Okay, scroll down, go to curriculum, click on curriculum maps, click on your grade level, and then scroll down and you'll be able to see our ELA standards aligned here to each of the areas. Okay. So those are 3 ways that you can access the ELP standards that are already aligned to what you're supposed to be teaching. So we've done some of that work for you. Now let's go ahead and go back to our list. Okay, so we went over the Google site, the picker. We went over the Leona website with the spreadsheets. And then we have attachment A, which is your ILLP. You want to do that for an intermediate student. You don't have to include one for each level. You just have to include it for the intermediate student. Objectives need to be aligned to your ELA standard. Okay, so be sure that your objectives are aligned to your standard. You do not need an objective for every English language proficiency standard, but you do need to weave in your ELP standards in what you're teaching throughout the week. Now let me show you what that looks like on a lesson plan. We have a sample lesson plan here from some teachers over at South Point Elementary School. When I look at their standard and I look at their key standard right here, that's their focus standard. They want students to compare and contrast the adventures and experiences of characters in a familiar text. When I look at their objectives, each of these objectives for the week should be aligned to that. So on Monday, we're looking at story details for this Jolly Farmer, story details for Jolly Farmer, story details for another story, Marvin K. Mooney, story details for Marvin K. Mooney, and then by Friday, they're able to compare and contrast as the standard's asking them to do. So on Monday, you'll notice they're stating details. Then they're using those details on Tuesday to create a circle map. Then on Wednesday, they're identifying details from a different story creating the circle map, and then using both circle maps to create a double bubble. That is the gist of what students are learning. That learning is going to help students really think about literature. So they found reading standard that is aligned to what they're already doing. So their ELP standard is describing characters from a literary selection. That aligns exactly to what they're already doing, so they don't have to plan something different for the ELL student. Then we come here and we're looking at our language standard, students using conventions when writing or speaking. That's grammar. So we want to look at the subject. ELL students can look at the subject. Our subject in this is characters, adventures, and experiences of characters. Then we're looking down here at, in kindergarten, they still have reading fluency, so they want to understand spoken words, syllables, and sounds, so we align that to vocabulary. Identify the meaning and using high-frequency words. So all of these so far align to what they're already teaching. Here's their speaking and listening standard. It says asking and answering questions about key details. Okay, they're already doing that. So there's a listening and speaking standard for ELLs that's about the same thing. So they've already made that connection. They're documenting that they're doing what all students need, both mainstream and their ELL student. Now, when we're looking at our writing one, with guidance and support from adults, respond to questions and suggestions from peers and add details to strengthen their writing. So their writing one came from their attachment A. Students will be able to express his or her thinking and ideas in a variety of genres. So as we continue, we look here, they have 5 ELP standards aligned to what they're already teaching. Now you could have, like they do, where they have the main standard and then an ELP standard, ELA standard, ELP standard, ELA standard, ELP standard. And you can always do those 5 because you lead centers in reading. So each of these topics are most likely going to be a center topic. And we want to go down into the lesson plan and make sure it's embedded in there. So for example, phonics is embedded. When we're looking at phonics up here, we are looking at fluency and we're looking at vocabulary. So we want to be sure that we're tying in those key words into there. So we want to do phonics / vocabulary. Now it's embedded in what they're already doing. So they're reviewing the families. Here, again, it's vocabulary. Reading decodable books. Okay, grammar. We don't need 20 minutes of grammar, but here in grammar, what they're doing is, let's go ahead and go back up to grammar, and they're working on the subject. So let's go ahead and put subject, and that's the topic they're working on. Participating in reading and retelling stories. That's listening / speaking. And then let's go ahead and do letters and high frequency word names. Again, that is vocabulary. So we can see that in here, what they're doing in centers is going to be aligned to their ELP standards that are lifted up here. So they want to go ahead and include that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, when we're looking in here, we want to be able to include those as well. So if I look at their hook, teacher will review the story, read the story, inviting students to join in. If you know the story, read along with me. Okay, so then they're able to practice some words. When we're looking here, we want students to model details from the story and write it. Let's go up here and we can say describing characters, right? So using details, and we can focus on describing words. And then right here, can this really happen? We want them to use describing words. So I'm just embedding what is already in there so that when I'm teaching it, I can focus on it. And teaching students how to use describing words when they're speaking or retelling is good for all students, not just for English language learners. And so when we come to guided practice, we'll state and write details. So we want to put in the writing is right here. State and write details. Writing is happening right here. Students will state their favorite character, and then we have speaking and listening. So it's embedded throughout, and we just want to be sure that we are embedding our standards throughout the lesson. So this is our 10-minute tutorial. If you have any questions, please contact nicole.mcneil@leonagroup.com.